Digging a little further into this Project LJ 2005 Jeep Unlimited automatic transmission that we're doing for the wife. So today is spark plugs day, and you want to take your time. You want to pull each plug, keep them in order so that you can read them. There's a bunch of charts online to see. You can compare it for colors and condition and be able to tell if the cylinder's running lean or running rich. If it gets too lean, it can get to be a problem with it burning hot and can cause damage. If it goes too rich, you're dumping a lot of fuel into your exhaust. That won't be great for your cats either. And just general condition. Get an idea, since this is a used vehicle that I just bought, I can get an idea of just what kind of maintenance was being done. If the plugs are ridiculously worn down, well, then we know that it probably went a little light on maintenance. Simple hand tools, easy job. We need to take that coil rail, this piece right here, off. So you got coil packs, 1, 2, 3 coil packs that run 2 cylinders each, and there's just 4 13mm bolts that'll hold that on. This last one's behind the dipstick there, hard to see. So 13mm socket for that. Got a 5/8 spark plug socket for the spark plugs. And if we look at the emissions tag over here, we can see right there it wants to run anywhere from 30 thousandths to 35 thousandths of an inch gap. So gapping tool. And notice it's got a flange on it that will let you open or close up the gap. Don't bang them. Don't knock them on the fender or the bumper or something to close up the gap. You want to be not necessarily gentle, but you don't want to beat up the spark plugs. And it's easy enough to damage them. And it's just not a great idea. I mean, even if you look in the packaging, these things come quote unquote pre-gapped, which is part of the reason they do this. But when you open the packaging on these, they come with a cardboard tube to make sure nothing touches that tip of that spark plug. So yeah, it's mostly to protect the pre-gap, but it's also just because it's just in general not a great idea to beat the end of the spark plug. You can damage the ceramic insulator on the end of the tip there. And then the last thing we'll want is just a little bit of anti-seize to coat the threads as we're reinstalling the new plugs. Put them back in hand tight. You don't ram them in, you don't tighten them down super hard. But yeah, we'll get started with pulling those 4 bolts out. Okay, good news, bad news game. That upgraded alternator is right in the way. So 15mm socket, we're gonna have to just break that loose. We're gonna have to break that loose and get that out of there. And it doesn't want to come with just a ratchet handle, so we're gonna have to get the breaker bar. Okay, now in order to get this to loosen up, first we're gonna go ahead and get the tension off the belt. So you just get a 1/2-inch drive breaker bar into the tensioner and apply pressure towards the engine, towards the driver's side of the vehicle, and that lets us wheel the belt out. we can try this again. See if we can. See if we can get this bolt to cooperate. So this one does not have anti-seize on it. I can tell you that already, just based on how it's coming out. I'm gonna try to wiggle it back and forth a little bit just to make sure that I'm not gonna break it off. That's the kind of thing that will turn this job from a fairly quick one into an all-day slugfest with some unfriendly words added. It is coming. I'm also going to break the bottom bolt loose. That one doesn't have to come all the way out. Just has to be loose enough for the alternator to pivot. And that one actually feels like it does have anti-seize on it. Be right back once I get this out. Alright, we got that bolt out. Alternator is swinging loose, so that's out of the way. And the coil pack pulled right out. So now we can get to the spark plugs and start pulling those out. That bolt was entirely dry. No anti-seize on it. And you can see there's a little bit of surface galling in there, which is why it was not coming out friendly like. We'll go ahead and use some anti-seize on the reassembly. You can also see from here how worn the surface of that idler pulley is. I've actually got a new belt idler pulley and tensioner that will go in soon. Not today. Okay. We've got the last of our plugs out. looking at them all. No oily residue. No really excessive wear, but there's definitely wear. If we look at the gaps on these, using our spark plug gapping tool, 40 thousandths passes right through. So these are somewhere over 40 thousandths. That should not pass through there. Remember, the spec on that sticker is 32 to 35 thousandths. So these are worn. Just old Champion spark plugs, nothing's fancy, nothing special. They came out pretty easy. They're definitely not original, they've been changed. Did have to add a couple of tools. I needed a shorter extension to get that 6th one out. Was hitting the tub of the Jeep when I was using this longer one. So, no big deal, got it done. And now, we can start working on these new plugs. Just needed to find somewhere to put the camera phone. So I'm going to set it to 35 thousandths. Obviously, it's not passing. It's actually working at 32 thousandths. And that is the spec. So actually, I'm going to leave that alone. All right. This gauge is a little bit beat up. There we go. Goes right through. So 32 thousandths is good. 35 thousandths is not. So make sure I get that in the camera. I want to make sure that when it's going across 32 thousandths that it goes through. You're not forcing it. It should just kind of go through. And it does. So that's 32 thousandths gauge or thickness wire. 35 doesn't pass, we're in spec. We're going to install this plug. Now, I did mention we're going to put a little anti-seize on here. We're not trying to paint the fence, we're not trying to frost the cake. Just a little bit of a dab. Just to get it going. By putting it towards the nose of the spark plug like that, or the tip of the spark plug like that, it'll work its way down the threads, and it'll be good enough to get a good coating and keep these from galling or getting stuck in the threads of the head. You don't want to have to deal with a stripped out head. When you're starting these, you want to not force it. You want to figure out how to get it lined up by feel and let it thread in easily. If it doesn't thread in easily, you're cross-threading it. Stop, pull it back out, inspect the spark plug for damage, and start over. That started nice and easy. I'm going to go ahead and put the ratchet on it and run it the rest of the way in. And again, hand tight. We're not talking about 40 foot-pounds of torque here. We're talking about snug. It's a spark plug. It's not holding the engine to the transmission or anything like that. It's just keeping the plug seated in the cylinder head so that it can contain the spark inside the cylinder. That's it. One other thing I forgot to mention earlier, heat range. Plugs come in different heat ranges, or heat zones. So that's controlled in a few different ways, but a big part of it is how deep it sits. So you can see these are the same. New plugs are NGKs, the old plugs are Champions, but as far as where this thing is sitting, once it's inside the cylinder head, it will end up setting up very similar to what was in there. So These should be stock factory replacements, and that's what was running in the engine. So we don't have a situation where somebody tried swapping in hotter plugs to burn oil off. Again, the plugs were clean. There wasn't any sign of oil on them, so I'm not really worried about that, but just one more sign that we probably have a decent engine, albeit possibly some catalytic converter issues. All right, spark plugs are all in, went in with no problem. Gap to 32 thousandths, that's right within the spec of 30 thousandths to 35 thousandths. That was dictated on the emissions sticker, so we should be fine there. Go ahead and get our bolts, put a little bit of fresh anti-seize on the very tip of them because somebody slathered them all up. Probably clean them up a little bit. And we'll get that bolted in, and then we'll bolt the alternator back in and tighten that up and put the belt back on. I like to start real loose, just get this bolt in first, the second one from the front. That's probably the easiest one to get this thing lined up and started. Get the second one in, and then the ones that are more blocked by hoses and dipsticks and stuff are easier to get in and lined up. Okay, so we've got the coil pack screwed back in. Alternator is tight, reinstalled. Bolt has anti-seize on it. Air tube is reconnected. Heater hoses are back in the hose clamp. So everything's back where it belongs. Tools are off the fender. Nothing's gonna fall in. Previous owner did neglect to reinstall some fan shroud bolts, so we'll have to find some. But let's go ahead and see how we did. And we've got a dead battery. Just want to point out, there is the myth of the anti-seize that it just gets everywhere. And it can. If you're not careful, it can. But I went ahead and worked with the 4 bolts that already had anti-seize on it. I added anti-seize back to them. I added anti-seize to the 6 spark plugs and to the bolt for the alternator, because I do live in the Northeast, where between the salt from the snow and driving out on the beach, we get lots of corrosion. And I don't have anti-seize. Anyway, there's no anti-seize on the fender. Obviously it's silver, so that would be hard to see. But no anti-seize. So just be careful with this stuff, guys. Don't bathe in it, and don't try to overuse it. Thin coating, start at the tip of the bolt where it's entering the material it's going into. A little bit does it. If it's going to be a long section of thread, then you might want to go ahead and put some all the way up the bolt. But you don't need to slather it on. It will work. Okay, we let the battery charge for a little bit, and we're at cold idle right now, so it's running a little bit fast, but sounds great. It's not missing. I do think we need a new tensioner, so glad I ordered that. Already have it on the shelf ready to go in. We'll handle that another day. And all, nice easy job. A little bit of tune-up work. For 184,000 miles on a Jeep 4-liter 6-cylinder engine, that's pretty whippy throttle response. I'm happy. That's all for now.